My daughter-in-law accidentally sent me my son's lunch for work. As a joke, I showed it to a coworker. He immediately went pale and told me, "Take your son to the hospital, right now." "Why?" I asked. "I can't explain it now. It's something terrible. Just do what I say, or your son won't survive." What I discovered at the hospital sent a chill down my spine. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has traveled. On a Monday morning, my house in Chicago was as busy as ever. The sound of pots and pans clashing in the kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the soft fragrance of a perfume sample I had left on the dining room table. I was rushing around, getting ready to go to the office to supervise the new line of perfumes, the pride of my entire life. Julian, my son, was already ready in an impeccable suit, preparing for an important meeting at the financial firm where he is the managing director. Seeing my boy combing his hair in front of the mirror filled me with pride. Julian was all I had, my only child, to whom I had dedicated my entire life to raise and love. In the kitchen, Natalie, my daughter-in-law, was busy preparing lunch. She had been up early, her long hair tied back in a ponytail, and while she stirred a pan, she chatted on the phone with her friends. Her voice was a cheerful chatter, full of laughter, but her hands moved with agility, arranging food in 2 Tupperware containers, a large one for Julian and a smaller one for me. Standing at the kitchen entrance, I watched her work with a warmth in my chest. "You're so thoughtful, my dear. You not only worry about your husband, but also about your mother-in-law," I said, unable to hide a smile. Natalie turned around. Her eyes sparkled, and she smiled slightly. "I just want everyone to eat well, Caroline. Eating out these days is just not safe anymore." Her words moved me. I had always seen Natalie as a daughter, my beautiful and dynamic daughter-in-law, who always knew how to take care of the family. As we prepared to leave, Natalie hurried to give me the small container, while she put the large one in Julian's car. I carefully placed the container in my purse, thinking about how incredibly attentive Natalie was. She was a family woman. She always made me feel at ease. Then I walked out the door, not realizing that this Tupperware would change everything in my life. At lunchtime, my office was as lively as usual. The younger employees gathered around the table, laughing and gossiping about their husbands and their kids. I opened my purse, took out the Tupperware, but immediately realized that something was wrong. This was not the small container Natalie had prepared for me, but the large one, Julian's. I laughed and shook my head. Natalie is more scatterbrained than this old mother-in-law of hers, I thought, believing it was just an adorable mix-up. As I opened the lid, I noticed that the rim of the Tupperware had some small white granules on it, as if it were sugar. How strange. "A savory dish with sugar on the rim," I murmured, half curious and half amused. The employees who were nearby swirled around me and teased me. "Caroline, the rim of your Tupperware looks like a salt-rimmed margarita." The whole office burst into laughter. The atmosphere was as cheerful as a small party. I took the container and brought it to Arthur, my closest colleague. He had been a doctor before retiring, and now worked as an occupational safety consultant for my perfume company. Arthur was always the person I trusted most, with whom I shared the little anecdotes of my life. "Look at this," I said, laughing, showing him the container. Natalie, so young and already more absent-minded than I am, she cooks her husband a savory dish and puts sugar on the rim of the Tupperware. Maybe she sees how hard Julian works and wants him to gain some weight. I joked, expecting him to laugh out loud like the others. But Arthur didn't laugh. He took the container, tilted it under the fluorescent office light, and gently rubbed the rim with his finger. Suddenly, his face turned pale and he narrowed his eyes as if he had just seen something horrible. "Who prepared this food for you?" he asked in a deep, serious voice. I frowned, a little confused. "My daughter-in-law, as always, she prepares lunch for me and my son to take to work. Today, she accidentally gave me Julian's container." "Why?" I replied, trying to stay calm, though a bad feeling was beginning to creep over me. Arthur didn't answer immediately. He looked at me with eyes full of concern and, suddenly, said aloud, with an urgency that startled me, "Take your son to the hospital. Right now." That sentence was like a stab straight to the heart. I froze, feeling the blood turn to ice in my veins. The laughter and chatter in the office died down instantly. Everything fell into a deathly silence. The young employees looked at each other, bewildered, not understanding what was happening. I tried to keep my composure and asked again, "Why? Explain it to me, Arthur. What's going on?" But he just shook his head. His voice was trembling. "I can't explain it to you now. It's something terrible. Do as I say, or your son will not survive." I felt my heart break into pieces. Julian, the son I had protected my whole life, the boy I loved more than myself, was in danger? I didn't understand it. I didn't want to believe it. But the gravity in Arthur's voice prevented me from doubting. I turned to him, struggling to keep my voice from breaking. "Are you serious? This isn't a joke, is it?" Arthur took my hand. His eyes were red. "I swear to you, I would never joke about something like this. Those white granules are not sugar. You have to act now." His words were like an alarm bell that woke all my senses. I didn't know exactly what was happening, but my mother's instinct told me that something was very, very wrong. The Tupperware was still there, on the table, like a silent warning. I looked at it, then at Arthur, and for a moment I felt the whole world collapsing at my feet. Arthur practically pushed me out of the office. His voice was pressing and full of anguish. "Go now, you can't waste a single second." He already had his phone in hand, calling a contact in the toxicology department at St. Joseph's Hospital. His voice trembled, but it was clear. "I need you to analyze a sample immediately. It's a matter of life or death." I just stood there, clutching the container, my mind in chaos. Just a few minutes ago, I was joking about the white granules on the rim, and now that container felt like a bomb that could destroy my entire world. I carefully placed it in a plastic bag, feeling as if I were handling evidence from a crime scene. "I'm leaving right now," I told Arthur. My voice hardened to hide the fear growing inside me. He nodded, with a serious look. "I'll see you at the hospital. Don't let anyone touch that container." I called my personal driver, Robert, who has worked for my family for over 20 years. When I told him to drive straight to St. Joseph's, he glanced at me in the rearview mirror with curiosity but didn't ask any questions. "Quickly, Robert," I said, my voice hoarse. During the ride, I sat in the back seat, clinging to the plastic bag, my gaze fixed on the window. The streets of Chicago were as bustling as ever. The green city buses speeding by, the street vendors shouting their wares on the sidewalk, and the bright sun reflecting off the glass buildings. But it all seemed distant, as if I were in another world, one where only I and the terror of what was about to happen existed. Upon arriving at the hospital, I went to the reception, still clutching the plastic bag. The young nurse, with thick-rimmed glasses, looked up in surprise when I told her, "I need a container of food analyzed. There's something strange in it." She blinked, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing, but then the phone on her desk rang. I vaguely heard Arthur's voice on the other end of the line, and the nurse nodded, quickly jotting something down. "All right, ma'am. Please wait a moment. The sample will be taken to the lab immediately," she said, with a professional tone that didn't hide her curiosity. I just nodded, too drained to explain further. An employee in a white coat took the sample, and I was guided to a waiting area in the hallway. The hallway of St. Joseph's Hospital was crowded with people, hurried footsteps, the monotonous sound of speakers calling for patients, and the smell of disinfectant that hung in the air. I sat down, clasping my hands, trying to stay calm. But every minute that passed felt like an hour. I looked at the clock on the wall. The minute hand moved with excruciating slowness, as if mocking my patience. In my mind, images of Julian appeared, as a child, running through Lincoln Park holding my hand. Older, on the podium receiving his university degree, with a radiant smile, and even the more recent times when he complained of being tired, rubbing his stomach with a weak voice. "It must be stress from work, Mom." I had thought it was just stress, like any other young man, but now Arthur's words echoed in my head. "Or your son will not survive." I felt my heart tighten. How could this be? Who would want to harm Julian, my good, hard-working son? I took out my phone and dialed Julian's number. It rang, but he didn't answer. I knew he was in an important meeting, but the silence on the other end of the line made my heart sink. I left him a message. My fingers trembled as I typed. Julian, you need to get a medical checkup today. In secret, don't tell anyone, not even your wife. I hit send and stared at the screen, waiting for a reply. But nothing. I told myself to calm down, but the anxiety grew, like a wave about to drown me. Finally, after an eternity, a young doctor came out of the laboratory. He wore an ID badge with the name Miller. His face was serious, but his gaze was kind. "You're the person who brought the food container, right?" he asked, holding a sheet of paper. I nodded, my heart pounding as if it wanted to leap out of my chest. He sat next to me and said, slowly but clearly, "We analyzed the food sample. It contains arsenic. It is an extremely toxic substance. If consumed continuously over a long period, it causes damage to the stomach, liver, kidneys, and can even lead to death." I heard his words and was paralyzed. The word arsenic echoed in my head, as sharp as a razor. I was stunned, unable to say anything. I just stared at the doctor, hoping I had misheard. "But doctor," Miller continued. His voice became more grave. "Symptoms such as fatigue, abdominal pain, nausea, perfectly match chronic poisoning. If your son has been eating these foods for a long time, there is a high risk that he has been poisoned." My mind was spinning. I suddenly remembered the times Julian complained of being tired. The nights he sat on the sofa rubbing his stomach, his face pale. "It must be the pressure from work," he used to say, and I had believed him. I took him to the doctor, but they only prescribed vitamins and recommended rest. How could I have imagined that, in those very lunches prepared with so much care every day, a deadly poison was hidden? I clenched my fists, my nails dug into my skin, trying not to break down right there. "Thank you, doctor," I whispered, my voice choked. "Doctor," Miller nodded, placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, and left. I walked out of the hospital, feeling like my feet weighed a ton. Sitting in the car, I hugged the plastic bag containing the Tupperware, as if it were the last piece of evidence of a terrifying truth. The streets of Chicago were still noisy, with the sound of horns and people's laughter, but I no longer heard anything. In my head, there was only one question that repeated over and over. Who did this? Who would want to harm Julian? And then, a thought chilled my blood. Natalie, my daughter-in-law, the one who had prepared that food, the person I had always trusted, whom I loved like a daughter. No, it can't be, I told myself. Natalie was always so attentive. She took care of Julian with every meal, at every moment. But then, the image of the white granules on the rim of the Tupperware appeared in my mind, and Arthur's voice echoed. "It's something terrible." I took out my phone and checked the message I had sent to Julian. Still no reply. I wanted to call again but stopped my hand. If it was Natalie, I couldn't let her suspect anything. I needed time to investigate, to protect my son. Sitting in the car, I looked out the window. The evening light reflected off the skyscrapers, but in my heart there was only darkness. Julian was all I had. I had lost my husband 10 years ago, and I had built the perfume brand by myself to leave it to my son. I couldn't lose him. I couldn't. That afternoon, I couldn't go home right away. My mind was still in turmoil after what Dr. Miller had told me at St. Joseph's Hospital. I needed answers, a clue to understand why this nightmare was happening to Julian. I decided to drive directly to the office of Mr. Wallace, my personal attorney, who had helped me with all the legal matters of my perfume brand for over 20 years. If there was anyone who thoroughly understood my estate and what I had arranged, it was him. When I entered his office, Mr. Wallace was sitting behind his desk, with his gold-rimmed glasses, carefully reading a file. Upon seeing me, he looked up and gave me a kind smile. "Caroline, what a surprise to see you here without an appointment. Is something important?" I sat in the leather chair in front of him, getting straight to the point. "Mr. Wallace, I need you to review my will and all the documents of my estate, right now." My voice sounded firmer than I expected, as if I were trying to hide the storm of emotions I felt inside. Mr. Wallace frowned, but asked no more questions. He stood up, opened a filing cabinet, and took out a thick folder. "This is the last draft you signed last year," he said, placing the papers in front of me. I turned the pages one by one. The dry words about properties, real estate, and company shares paraded before my eyes. But when I reached the section on the distribution of the inheritance, I felt my blood run cold. In the will, I had clearly stipulated that my assets would be divided equally between Julian and Natalie, my son and my daughter-in-law, whom I had always considered a daughter. But there was a clause that made me shudder. If one of the two passed away before me, the survivor would automatically inherit the entire estate. That is, if Julian died, Natalie would become the sole heir. I looked up at Wallace. My voice trembled. And if I'm still alive, could she get anything? Mr. Wallace adjusted his glasses. His voice was grave and clear. If you are still alive, you remain the owner of the perfume brand and have every right to change the will at any time. But if Julian were to pass away before you, his personal assets, properties, investments would gradually pass into Natalie's hands. When you pass away, legally, that is the shortest path for her to get everything. He paused, looking at me as if to make sure I understood the weight of his words. I nodded, but inside, everything was collapsing. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, and the picture that was forming left me frozen. On the way home, I couldn't stop thinking about Natalie. She had always been the perfect daughter-in-law in my eyes. Beautiful, attentive, she always knew how to make me happy. But now, my memories of her felt distorted. I remembered the times she discreetly asked me about the value of the brownstone in Lincoln Park, or her casual questions about my investment projects in Scottsdale. Once, during dinner, she let it slip. If one day you're no longer in charge, I'll continue to develop the brand, right, Caroline? I promise I'll do a great job. At that moment, I just smiled, thinking it was the concern of a dedicated daughter-in-law. But now, that sentence echoed in my head, sharp as a warning. Had Natalie planned it all along? Did she see Julian and me not as her family, but as obstacles on her path to an immense fortune? When I got home, it was almost dark. The yellow light from the porch illuminated Natalie's figure, sitting in a wicker armchair, checking her cell phone. She looked up and smiled at me, as radiant as ever. "You're home, Caroline? I just booked an appointment at the spa for the weekend. Do you want to come with me? They have an amazing, relaxing massage package." Her voice was soft and carefree, but it no longer gave me the same warmth. I looked into her eyes, trying to find a sign, a hint of doubt, a flicker of guilt, but I saw nothing but that perfect smile. "I already have a commitment, my dear. You go with your friends," I replied curtly, quickly entering the house. I didn't want her to see how my hands were trembling, nor the fury and pain I was trying to suppress in my gaze. In the living room, I collapsed onto the sofa and put my hands to my head. My heart was divided. One part of me refused to believe that Natalie, the girl I had welcomed into my family with open arms, could do something so monstrous. But the other part, a mother's reason, screamed at me that I had to protect Julian, even if it meant facing the cruelest truth. I remembered the early days, when Julian brought Natalie home to introduce her. She was shy, held Julian's hand, and told me, "I promise I will take very good care of him, ma'am." I believed her. I thought I was lucky to have a daughter-in-law like her. But now, each of those memories was like a knife stabbing into my heart. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, as if a rock were crushing me. Sleep had done me no good. I only had nightmares about Julian, about the Tupperware, and about Natalie's smile, a smile I no longer knew was real or a mask. I put on a dark blue blouse, the color Julian once said made me look very imposing, and drove to his office in downtown Chicago. I didn't warn him. I just sent him a short message. "I need to see you. Right now." During the drive, I tried to stay calm, but my hands gripped the steering wheel, soaked in sweat. I knew this conversation would change everything, but I couldn't postpone it any longer. Julian had to know the truth. When I arrived, Julian had just come out of a meeting. His jacket was a little wrinkled, but his smile was still radiant when he saw me. "Mom, what are you doing here without telling me? Are you coming to see if I'm working hard?" He joked, in his usual light tone. Seeing my son there, so healthy and carefree, broke my soul. How was I going to tell him that the woman he loved, the person he trusted most, might be plotting to kill him? But I had no choice. "Julian, come to your office with me. It's something important," I said, with an unintended seriousness. He frowned, his smile vanished, but he nodded and led me to his private office. The office was spacious, with a large window overlooking the bustling city. Julian sat down and gestured for me to take a seat in front of him. "What's wrong, Mom? Why so serious? Is there a problem with the perfume company?" he asked, still thinking it was a normal conversation. I didn't answer immediately. I opened my purse and took out the folder with the lab results from St. Joseph's Hospital and the copy of the will that Mr. Wallace had given me the day before. I put them on the desk, pushed them towards him, and looked him directly in the eyes. "Read it, Julian," I said, my voice hoarse with contained emotions. Julian took the documents and began to turn the pages. His expression changed rapidly, from indifference to confusion and then to a deathly pallor. When he read the lab results, I saw his hands tremble, making the paper crinkle. "Arsenic? In my food?" He looked up, his eyes wide, as if he couldn't believe what he was reading. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady, and told him everything. How I had mixed up his Tupperware, the white granules on the lid, Arthur's warning, and the lab results confirming the presence of a deadly poison. I told him slowly, detail by detail, as if by speaking quickly I couldn't bear the weight of the truth. Julian was paralyzed, still clutching the papers. He shook his head again and again, as if wanting to reject it all. "It can't be, Mom," he said with a choked voice. "Natalie loves me. She loves our family. She cooks for me every day, takes care of me in every detail. How could she?" His voice trailed off, and I saw his eyes turn red. Seeing my son like this tore me apart inside. I wanted to hug him, tell him it was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence was in front of us. I couldn't lie to him, or to myself. I let Julian process the shock, and then I said, in a slow but firm voice, "I know it's hard to believe, son. I don't want to believe it either. But the proof is here. And do you remember how your health has been these last few months? The times you complained of being tired, of stomach pain, of nausea. I thought it was because of work, but now I know it wasn't." I paused and looked into his eyes. "Julian, I can't lose you. I need you to face this truth, however painful it may be." Julian lowered his head, covering his face with his hands and closing his eyes tightly. I knew he was trying to connect the dots. The nights he came home exhausted, the times Natalie brought him orange juice, or the meals she prepared for him with a tender smile. Suddenly, he slammed the table hard, startling me. "If this is true," he said, his voice trembling with rage, "then she didn't just betray me. She wants to steal your legacy and destroy our family." I saw in his eyes a pain mixed with determination, as if he had just realized that the life he believed in had been shattered by the person he loved. I took his hand and squeezed it tightly. "You and I have to cooperate with the police," I said, with a determined voice. "We can't face her alone. If we stay quiet, you'll be in more danger." Julian looked at me. His eyes wavered between pain and doubt. I knew he still loved Natalie, that he still wanted to believe there was some explanation. But then he took a deep breath and nodded, his eyes red. "Mom, I'll do what you say. We're going to unmask her. I can't let you suffer another loss." That same afternoon, Julian and I went to the police precinct to see Detective Bryant, whom I had met at a business seminar a couple of years ago. The detective was a middle-aged man, with graying hair, a deep voice, but with a penetrating gaze. We sat in a small office with white walls that smelled of coffee. I told him the whole story, from the Tupperware to the lab results, while Julian added details about his health. Detective Bryant listened attentively, taking notes, nodding from time to time. "This is a very serious case," he said, in a serious tone. "We will keep the Tupperware as evidence, and we will plan to install cameras in your house to monitor her. We will also need to analyze more food samples." He looked at me and then at Julian. "But you both must maintain absolute secrecy. We can't let the suspect know we are investigating her." Julian nodded, but I saw him clench his fists. "Understood," he said in a hoarse voice. I knew he was fighting with himself, with the love he once felt for Natalie. When we left the precinct, Julian remained silent for a long time. We were in the parking lot, in the midst of the bustle of Chicago. I looked at my son, the young man I had raised, who now seemed to have aged 10 years in a single day. "Mom," he turned to me, his voice choked. "I never imagined that the person sleeping next to me every night would want to kill me. But for you, for the brand, for our family, I will be strong." I went to him and hugged him tightly. His body trembled, and I felt his pain mix with mine. "Son, I'm here," I whispered, as tears fell silently. "We will get through this together." My heart was aching but filled with determination. From now on, we were no longer the victims. We were going to turn the tables, and I would do anything to protect my son, no matter the price. After leaving the police station, Julian and I sat in the car. No one said a word for several minutes. The car's engine hummed monotonously, but inside me, everything was a whirlwind. We had just entered a war where the enemy was someone we considered family. Julian stared out the window, his face tense, and his hands clenched on his knees. I knew he was struggling with himself, caught between love and betrayal. "Mom," he finally said, his voice grave. "How are we going to expose her? I don't want to drag this out any longer." Feeling my determination grow. "We're going to make her lose her patience, Julian. If she really has a plan, she'll make a mistake." Upon arriving home, I immediately called Detective Bryant to discuss the plan. He listened and then suggested in a firm voice, "Attack her motive, the money. If what she's after is the estate, make her believe the opportunity is slipping away. She'll panic and act rashly." His words were like a flash of lightning in my mind. I immediately thought of the will, something that seemed to interest Natalie greatly. If I made her believe that the fortune was about to slip through her fingers, she wouldn't be able to stay calm. "I know what to do," I told Bryant, feeling like a strategist about to enter battle. The next morning, I called Mr. Wallace, my lawyer. "Mr. Wallace, could you come to the house this afternoon? I want to discuss a new will," I said, making sure my voice was loud while Natalie was nearby, arranging some flowers in the living room. I saw her pause for a moment, her hands still. But she quickly bent down, pretending to continue with her task. I knew she had heard me. That afternoon, when Wallace's car pulled up to the gate, I deliberately opened the main gate so Natalie could see him clearly. She was in her Porsche, saying goodbye to a friend, and her gaze slid towards the car with a curiosity she couldn't hide. In the living room, Mr. Wallace and I sat across from each other, with the window open so our voices could be heard outside. I spoke in a loud, clear voice. "Mr. Wallace, I've thought about it a lot. In 1 month, I will officially change the will. I want to donate the majority of my estate to a foundation to build a home for abandoned children. They need that money more than my children do." Wallace, whom I had already briefed on the plan, nodded and played along. "That's a very noble idea, Caroline. I will prepare the documents immediately. What percentage of your assets do you wish to allocate?" I replied, deliberately emphasizing, "At least 80%. The perfume brand, the properties, everything. I want to leave a meaningful legacy." At that moment, I heard stealthy footsteps in the hallway. Natalie passed by, with a tray of fruit in her hands, but her steps clearly paused for a second. I glanced at her and saw her freeze for an instant, her eyes wide, before hurrying on. My heart raced. She had heard it, and I knew it had touched her greatest fear. When Wallace left, Natalie accompanied him to the door, a forced smile on her lips that no longer had its usual naturalness. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Wallace," she said, but her voice trembled slightly, as if she were trying to hide something. That night, I decided to take the plan a step further. I organized a family dinner, as I used to do to maintain a warm atmosphere. Julian sat beside me, and Natalie opposite, smiling, but her eyes lacked their usual sparkle. As I poured the wine, I deliberately brought up the will again. "I've thought it over. The perfume brand is my life's work, but I want it to be linked to philanthropy. Donating my assets to the foundation is the way for me to feel at peace." Natalie nodded, pretending to agree. "How noble of you, Caroline. I fully support you." But I saw her grip her wine glass, her red-painted nails digging into the crystal. Julian played along, his tone soft but full of intention. "That's right, Mom. It's very valuable that you're thinking about society. I would also like the brand to be associated with a humanitarian image in the future." I glanced at Natalie and saw her lower her face, her lips pressed tightly together. After dinner, Natalie made an excuse. I have a late spa appointment with a friend. I think I'll be a little late. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and left. I pretended to be busy clearing the table, but as I passed by the garden, I heard her talking on the phone in a low but hurried voice. We can't wait another month. We have to act now. My heart stopped. I pretended to cough and walked into the garden as if by chance. Natalie was startled and turned around with panicked eyes. Yes, my massage appointment is changed to tomorrow morning. I'm a little tired today, she said, quickly changing her tone before hanging up. I smiled and nodded. Are you tired, my dear? Then get some rest. Don't push yourself too hard. But inside, I knew she was panicking. That night, on my way up to my room, I passed by Natalie's room. The light was on, and her silhouette was projected on the curtain, pacing back and forth, the phone glued to her ear. I stood in the hallway, listening. Her voice was a tense whisper. I have to do something before that old woman signs the new will. I went back to my room. I closed the door, my heart pounding a mile a minute. I knew it was the sign that her anxiety had reached its limit. The days following that family dinner, the atmosphere in the house grew tense, though on the surface Julian and I tried to keep everything normal. But inside, I felt like I was walking on a tightrope where every step had to be careful because the slightest mistake could ruin everything. One morning, while making coffee, Julian came into the kitchen looking tired. He sat down, rubbed his forehead, and said in a low voice, "Mom, the food Natalie has been cooking these past few days tastes really weird. Yesterday's soup was a bit bitter, and the orange juice had a cloudy white sediment." She didn't stop, he said, his eyes full of worry. His words were like a stab to the heart. I took his hand, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't eat anything she prepares for you. I'll take care of it." Days earlier, Detective Bryant had secretly installed a camera in the kitchen, hidden in the corner of the pantry. He summoned me to a small office near the precinct, where there was a large screen to monitor everything. I sat there with him and another officer, my eyes glued to the monitor. The image was sharp. Natalie stood in the kitchen, wearing an apron, her hair pulled back. She opened a small glass vial, tilted it slightly, and sprinkled a white powder into the pot of boiling soup. Her movements were slow and careful, as if she had done it hundreds of times. Her face was a mask of coldness, without a hint of doubt, without a trace of emotion. I gripped the edge of the table. My nails dug into the wood until it hurt. I wanted to run in, to scream at her, but Detective Bryant placed a hand on my shoulder and said in a low voice, "Easy, Caroline. We need more evidence. She's not going to get away." I nodded, but I felt a fire inside me. Watching Natalie stir the soup, a faint smile on her lips, made me feel like my world was falling apart. The daughter-in-law I had loved, whom I had trusted, was now a stranger, a danger lurking in my own home. I turned to Bryant with a trembling voice. "Are you sure the camera is recording everything? I don't want her to have any chance to deny it." He nodded, with an icy gaze. "Everything is being recorded, every detail clearly." That night, Julian ate the dinner Natalie prepared, but I had told him to only pretend to taste a little. As soon as he put down his spoon, he clutched his head, complaining of dizziness, and collapsed onto the sofa. Natalie rushed to him, held him, and said with false concern, "You've been working too much. It must be stress. Let me get you a glass of water." I watched from a corner of the room. Her smile was tender, but her gaze was cold, as if she were assessing whether her plan was working. I turned away, pretending to be busy with the dishes, but my heart ached like never before. Julian was acting very well, but I knew he was suffering too. Not from the poison, but from the betrayal of the woman he had loved. The food sample from that dinner was secretly collected by the police for analysis. The next morning, Detective Bryant called me to his office. He handed me the sheet with the results. His voice was grave. "The concentration of arsenic in the soup and orange juice is double that of the previous container." She panicked, probably for fear of losing the inheritance after hearing you talk about the foundation. "She's accelerating the plan." I took the paper. I read every line, feeling my blood run cold. "Double," I murmured, in disbelief. Natalie didn't just want to harm Julian. She wanted to do it quickly, before I could change the will. Bryant looked at me and said in a low voice, "You and your son must be more careful. She's losing control." From that day on, I started paying attention to every little detail. Every time Natalie served juice, she always served Julian first, carefully placing the glass in front of him before serving me or anyone else. Once I pretended to be thirsty and asked her to bring me a glass of orange juice. She moved nervously in the kitchen. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed me the glass. "Here you go, Caroline," she said, but she avoided my gaze, as if she were afraid I would discover something. I took the glass and smiled. "Thank you, my dear, but I'm actually craving a glass of water now." She froze for a moment and then nodded with a forced smile. Another night, Natalie brought a bowl of soup and placed it in front of Julian with a concerned air. "Eat, my love. I prepared this especially for you." I looked at Julian and gave him a look. He smiled weakly, but I spoke first. "I'm old now. I can only eat broth. Let your husband have this soup." Natalie stopped, the smile frozen on her lips. "Yes, of course," she replied, her voice a little broken, and she turned away quickly. I knew she was confused, and that gave me a strange relief mixed with pain. Every time I refused her food, I felt like I was weaving another thread in the trap we had set. Julian continued his performance, becoming more convincing each time. At work, he would deliberately rub his stomach, looking weak, which worried his colleagues. At home, he would lie on the sofa, sighing and complaining of fatigue. Natalie would look at him, a flash of satisfaction in her eyes, as if she believed the poison was taking effect. Seeing that broke my heart. Julian wasn't just my son. He was my pride, the one who would continue my dream. Seeing him pretend to be in pain to deceive the one trying to kill him filled me with both pride and a deep sadness. That same night, late, as I was passing through the hallway, I heard Natalie whispering on the phone. I stopped, pressed myself against the wall, trying to listen. "Just a few more days, after that, I'll be the only one on everything," she said, in a low but determined voice. I silently took out my phone, activated the voice recorder, and held it steady. When Natalie's voice came through clearly, I knew I had another crucial piece of evidence. I went back to my room and sent the recording to Detective Bryant with a message. "We're almost at the end." The next morning, Detective Bryant summoned Julian and me to the precinct. When we entered, he was sitting behind his desk, his gaze penetrating, but his voice calm. "We have enough evidence to arrest her, but to ensure she can't deny it, we need a final blow. A faked death for Julian will make her lower her guard and confess her plan." I looked at Julian, saw him clench his hands, his face tense. I knew he still loved Natalie, but he nodded, his voice hoarse. "I'll do it. If we keep waiting, she'll continue, and you'll be in danger too, Mom." His words were like a knife in my heart. I was proud of my son's strength, but it pained me to see him suffer the agony of betrayal. I took his hand and said in a low voice, "I'm here, Julian. We'll get through this." Detective Bryant nodded and motioned for an officer to take us to a conference room to finalize the details. The plan was meticulously laid out. The police coordinated with St. Joseph's Hospital to prepare a special room filled with hidden cameras in every corner. Dr. Evans, an old friend of Detective Bryant, agreed to help. She would create a fake medical file with a clear diagnosis of severe poisoning and cardiac arrest to make it more convincing. Julian and I spent hours with her, planning every step. Julian would pretend to be poisoned after dinner, collapsing at the table. I would be the one to call the ambulance and give Natalie the news of his death. Every detail was calculated, but the anxiety never left me. If Natalie didn't react as we expected, if she suspected something, everything could fall apart. That night, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Natalie prepared dinner as usual, served a bowl of aromatic soup, and placed it in front of Julian. "Eat, my love. I prepared this especially for you," she said, with a tender smile but a frigid gaze. I looked at Julian and gave him a signal with my eyes. He nodded slightly, took the spoon, pretended to taste a little, and then put it down, making a face. "I'm full today. I think I'll eat light." Natalie looked at him with a flash of disappointment, but quickly hid it with a smile. "Well, then I'll save it for you to eat tomorrow." A few minutes later, Julian began to act. He clutched his stomach, his face turned pale, and his breathing became ragged. "Mom, "It hurts so much," he whispered, before collapsing onto the table, knocking over a glass of water. I jumped up, screaming, "Julian, what's wrong with you?" My voice trembled, and it wasn't entirely acting. Seeing my son motionless, even though I knew it was fake, squeezed my heart. Natalie also shot up, rushed to him, took his hand, and screamed, "My love, wake up! What's wrong?" But the moment she leaned over, I saw a strange glint in her eyes. It wasn't concern, but a discreet satisfaction, as if everything was going according to plan. I quickly grabbed my phone, pretending to call for an ambulance, my voice panicked. "Please, come quickly," my son fainted. "He's not breathing." Natalie was beside him, covering her face and crying. "No, it can't be, he can't." But I noticed that even though tears were falling, there was no real pain. I turned away, avoiding her gaze, afraid I wouldn't be able to contain myself and scream the truth at her. A few minutes later, the sound of an ambulance siren filled the street. The paramedics, who were actually undercover police officers, put Julian on a stretcher and quickly loaded him into the ambulance. Natalie lunged forward, demanding to go with them. "I have to go with him. I'm his wife." But an officer stopped her, his voice firm. "I'm sorry. Only one person can accompany the patient." I stepped forward, took Natalie's hand, and pretended to comfort her. "You stay, my dear. I'll go with Julian. I'll let you know what happens." She nodded, her eyes red, but I felt her hand tremble, as if she were holding something back. I got into the ambulance, the door slammed shut, and the vehicle took off. Sitting next to Julian, I took his hand and whispered, "You did great. Now it's my turn." He opened his eyes and smiled weakly. "I trust you, Mom." I felt a warmth in my heart, but also a great heaviness. I knew this charade would be the turning point, but also another wound in both our souls. At St. Joseph's Hospital, everything was perfectly set up. Julian lay motionless on a bed, connected to wires and machines. A monitor simulated cardiac arrest, creating a terribly realistic scene. Dr. Evans was by his side, reviewing the fake file, and occasionally gave me a reassuring look. I sat by the bed, looking at my motionless son, and even though I knew it was all a lie, I couldn't stop my eyes from filling with tears. I thought about the years when Julian was little, when he ran through the garden holding my hand. Now he was here, as part of a plan to unmask the woman he once loved. I wiped my tears, telling myself I had to be strong. I took my phone and texted Natalie. My hands trembled as I typed, "Come to the hospital immediately." Julian didn't make it. I pressed send, feeling as if I had just thrown a stone into an abyss. Then I sat and waited, my heart in my throat. Every footstep in the hallway made me nervous. Detective Bryant was in a corner of the room, watching everything through the hidden camera monitor. He whispered, "You're doing very well. Now we just have to wait for her reaction." About 40 minutes after I sent the message, hurried footsteps were heard in the hallway of St. Joseph's Hospital. Natalie appeared, her hair disheveled, one heel crooked, and her eyes so red it looked like she had forced herself to cry the entire way. She lunged at me, hugged me tightly, and screamed, "It can't be, Caroline. Julian, he was so young." Her voice broke, but I could feel the falseness in every sound. I stood rigidly, trying to play the part of a devastated mother. "Natalie, calm down, my dear," I whispered, my voice choked, not from the acting, but from the rage and pain consuming me. Seeing her cry like that made me want to scream, but I knew it wasn't time yet. The play was still on, and I had to maintain my role. Detective Bryant and 3 plainclothes officers were a short distance away, pretending to be bystanders, but I knew they were watching Natalie's every move. One of them, wearing sunglasses, was discreetly recording with a small camera hidden in his clothing. Natalie noticed nothing. She continued to hug me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Caroline, how could this have happened? I can't believe it," she sobbed. I nodded, patting her back, but inside I just wanted to push her away and confront her with the truth. I guided her, my voice trembling. "Come see Julian one last time. He's in there." I led Natalie to the special room, where Julian lay motionless on the bed, covered with a sheet up to his chest, his face pale thanks to expert makeup. The machines around him simulated cardiac arrest with faint beeps, creating a terribly realistic atmosphere. Natalie approached. Her trembling hands touched Julian's. Her tears fell in torrents, but I noticed her gaze was not one of pain. It was one of relief, a strange glint, as if a great weight had just been lifted from her shoulders. My heart sank. How could she stand there, pretending to cry, when she herself had caused all of this? Suddenly, Natalie leaned in and whispered, so low I could barely hear her, "It's finally over." She bit her lip instantly, as if realizing her mistake. But it was too late. The phrase was heard clearly, captured by the hidden microphone in the room. I stood frozen, feeling my blood run cold. And just at that moment, Julian's eyes shot open, and he sat up abruptly in the bed. Natalie screamed and recoiled. "It can't be. I was so careful." Her voice was pure panic. Her eyes widened with absolute terror, as if she were seeing a ghost. I stood there, my heart pounding a mile a minute, not knowing whether to feel relief or pain. Julian looked directly at Natalie, his eyes full of anger and disappointment. "Careful?" he repeated, his voice as cold as ice. "Careful to kill me, right?" Natalie staggered backward, grabbing the edge of the bed to keep from falling. "No, that's not it. You're misunderstanding," she stammered. But her trembling voice betrayed her. Detective Bryant entered the room. His voice was firm. "We've heard enough, Miss Natalie. You are under arrest for attempted murder." 3 other officers appeared behind him, blocking any escape. Natalie turned, her face ashen. "No, it wasn't me," she shouted, her voice breaking. "It was just a spice. I just wanted to add more flavor." But Bryant didn't let her continue. He held up a folder and a USB drive. His voice was calm, but cutting. "Would you like to see the evidence? The video of you putting a white powder in the soup, the lab results with arsenic, the recording of your phone call, and what you just said a few seconds ago. It's all here." Natalie swayed, as if her legs couldn't support her. She looked at me, then at Julian, with a look of total panic. I didn't want to kill anyone," she muttered. But then, as if she couldn't bear the pressure anymore, she collapsed to the floor, covering her face and screaming. "I just wanted the money. I didn't want to do it, but that old woman was going to donate it all to charity. She left me no other choice." That confession was like the final stab, confirming all my suspicions. I stood there, looking at her, my heart torn between pain and relief. Pain for the betrayal of someone I considered my daughter, and relief because, finally, the truth had come to light. Julian came over, put his arm around me, and whispered, "Mom, we won." His voice trembled, but it was filled with determination. I took his hand and squeezed it, feeling the warmth of my son's hand, a warmth I almost lost forever. "Son, I'm so proud of you," I said, as tears fell silently. Natalie was still on the floor, her head bowed. Her sobs mixed with the sound of the officers' footsteps as they approached to handcuff her. "Come with us," Bryant said, without a hint of compassion. Natalie looked up, her pleading gaze directed at me, but I just shook my head. "You chose this path, Natalie," I said, my voice choked. "I trusted you, but you betrayed us all." When they took her away, the hospital hallway fell silent. I hugged Julian, feeling the beat of his heart, those beats I feared I would never hear again. We stood there, in the midst of the bustle of St. Joseph's, but in that moment, it was just the 2 of us. I thought about all the years that had passed, the days I raised Julian alone, the dream of building a perfume brand for him. All the pain, all the sacrifices, now made sense because I still had my son by my side. The police quickly took Natalie to an improvised interrogation room in the hospital, a small room with a cold fluorescent light. Julian and I were taken to an adjacent observation room with a 2-way mirror that allowed us to see everything without being seen. I sat down, holding Julian's hand, feeling the tremor in my son's fingers. He was silent, his gaze fixed on Natalie through the mirror, as if trying to find the image of the wife he once loved. I squeezed his hand and whispered, "Son, we'll end this today." But inside, I wasn't sure if I was comforting Julian or myself. Natalie sat across from Detective Bryant, her hair disheveled and her hands cuffed on the metal table. Her head was bowed, but I could still see the sweat on her forehead. Detective Bryant began, his voice soft but sharp. "Miss Natalie, we don't want to make things difficult for you. Just tell us the truth. Why did you do it?" Natalie looked up. Her eyes darted back and forth. Her voice was defiant. "I didn't do anything. You're making all this up to frame me." She spoke loudly, but her voice trembled, as if she were trying to convince herself more than anyone else. Bryant didn't respond. He silently placed a small glass vial on the table, the same one the police had found in my kitchen. "Then what is this?" he asked, his tone calm but full of pressure. "Salt, sugar, or arsenic?" Natalie stared at the vial with wide eyes but didn't answer. She bit her lip, clenching her hands so tightly that her knuckles turned white. I saw Julian beside me clench his fists. His breathing quickened. "Calm down, son," I whispered, holding his shoulder. But I too was holding back the rage boiling inside me. The interrogation room door opened, and a hospital doctor entered with some papers. "These are the results of the soup and juice samples we took from your house," he said, looking directly at Natalie. "The concentration of arsenic is enough to kill a healthy adult in a short time." Natalie shook her head, laughing nervously. Her voice broke. "No, it can't be. I was just giving him vitamins. Julian was always tired. I just wanted him to feel better." But her voice was weak, as if she didn't believe her own words. Bryant didn't let her continue. He turned on the screen on the table, and the video from the hidden kitchen camera appeared. The image was sharp. Natalie, standing in front of the pot, opening the small vial, sprinkling the white powder, and then quickly stirring, disguising it by adding a little salt and pepper. Her face was cold, without a hint of doubt. I heard Julian let out a choked sigh. He lowered his head, covering his face, as if he couldn't bear to see the woman he loved in that recording. I took his hand and squeezed it, saying nothing. My soul ached, but I knew it was time to be stronger than ever. "Do you have anything else to say?" Bryant asked. His voice remained calm but sharp as a razor. Natalie shook her head. Her eyes moved restlessly. Sweat ran down her cheeks. I don't know anything about arsenic," she stammered. Bryant signaled to the officer beside him, and an audio recording was played. Natalie's voice echoed in the room. "Just a few more days. After that, I'll be the only one on everything." It was the conversation I had recorded the night before, when she was whispering on the phone. Natalie froze, her face pale, as if she had been slapped. That's not me," she shouted, but her voice had no strength or conviction left. Julian, beside me, jumped up, his fists clenched and his eyes red. "Mom, I can't take it anymore," he shouted, about to leave the observation room. I quickly stopped him, hugging him tightly. "Son, let the police do their job. She can't deny it anymore." But seeing the pain in Julian's eyes, I knew it wasn't just rage, but a heart shattered by betrayal. The wife he had loved, whom he had trusted, was sitting there, cornered by her own actions. Bryant continued. He placed a copy of my will and my estate documents on the table, pointing to the crucial part. "If Julian died first, you would be the sole heir to all of your mother-in-law's assets. You knew that, didn't you?" Natalie looked at the papers, panic in her eyes. She opened her mouth, but couldn't say anything. Bryant went on. "You planned this for a long time, didn't you? You started with small doses of arsenic, and then increased them when you heard she planned to donate her fortune to charity." Natalie broke down crying, but they were not tears of remorse. She screamed, her voice filled with rage. "It's all that old woman's fault. If she hadn't announced the donation, I wouldn't have had to rush things like this." That sentence was like the final stab, straight to my heart. I was paralyzed, feeling the world collapse. Natalie not only wanted to kill Julian, but she blamed me, as if I had pushed her to commit this crime. Julian hugged me, his voice trembling. "Mom, don't listen to her. She doesn't deserve to make you suffer." Detective Bryant nodded to the officer beside him and signed a preventative detention order right there. "Miss Natalie will be transferred to the Central Precinct to continue the investigation," he said without a hint of compassion. Natalie collapsed, covering her face and sobbing, but no one in the room was moved. They took her away. The sound of their heavy footsteps echoed in the hospital hallway. Julian and I remained seated, silently watching through the two-way mirror, where only the empty table and the folder of documents remained. The next morning, Julian and I walked into the Chicago Police Headquarters, where Natalie had been taken for her official statement. The atmosphere in the building was heavy. It smelled of old paper and cold coffee. I took Julian's hand, feeling the tension in his fingers. We were led to a small room, where an officer told us to sit as witnesses. I looked at my son. His face still showed the pain of the previous day, but his gaze was firmer. "Mom, it all ends today, right?" he asked in a low voice. I nodded, squeezing his hand. "Yes, son. We'll put an end to this nightmare." They brought Natalie into the interrogation room, separated from us by a pane of glass. She sat with her head down, hands cuffed, her messy hair covering most of her face. There was nothing left of the glamour and charm of the daughter-in-law I had once been so proud of. The silk blouse she wore was wrinkled, her eyes swollen and red, not from crying but from exhaustion. I looked at her with a mixture of anger and pain. That woman had been part of my family, had sat at my table, had laughed with me and Julian. Now she was there, like a stranger, like someone who almost took everything I loved from me. Natalie's public defender, a middle-aged man in a gray suit, entered the room. He placed his briefcase on the table and said in a low voice, "Miss Natalie, I advise you to cooperate. The evidence against you is overwhelming." Natalie looked up with panic in her eyes, but then, as if all her strength had run out, she whispered, "I'm going to tell you everything. I don't want to hide anything anymore." That sentence left me frozen. Julian, beside me, took a deep breath, clenching his fists. I put a hand on his shoulder to calm him, but I too was trembling at what I was about to hear. Natalie began to confess. Her voice was weak but clear. "I researched arsenic on the internet, on hidden forums. I knew it wasn't easy to detect if you used small doses." She paused, swallowed, and continued. "I bought it from a contact on the black market, a seller of illegal chemicals on the outskirts of the city. I started putting it in Julian's food. Just a little every day." Hearing her sent a chill down my spine. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles hurt. The image of Natalie in the kitchen, sprinkling the white powder into the soup, appeared vividly in my mind. "I didn't want him to die right away," she said with a trembling voice. "I just wanted him to get weaker, for everyone to think it was an illness, and when he was gone, I would inherit the fortune. After that, I planned to find a way for Caroline." She hesitated, looking towards the glass as if she knew I was there. "For Caroline to also pass away naturally." Julian jumped up and slammed the table. "You wanted to kill Mom too," he shouted, his eyes red. I pulled him down to sit and hugged him tightly, whispering, "Son, calm down. She can't hurt us anymore." But inside, I felt shattered. Natalie not only wanted to steal my son, but she had also targeted me, all for limitless ambition. Detective Bryant, in the interrogation room, was taking careful notes. He asked in a calm voice, "So, what was your motive? Just the money?" Natalie nodded. Tears streamed down her face, but I saw no remorse. "I had nothing," she said. "I grew up in poverty. When I married Julian, I thought I would have a different life. But then she said she would donate her entire fortune to charity. I couldn't let that happen." I covered my face. Tears fell silently. I once thought Natalie was the ideal daughter-in-law. I believed she truly loved Julian. But now, the truth was revealed like an open wound. The police recorded the entire statement. They drew up the report, and Natalie's lawyer remained silent, unable to defend her when his own client had incriminated herself. Bryant signed the arrest warrant. His voice was firm. "You will be transferred to the detention center to continue the investigation. Attempted murder is not a minor issue." Natalie lowered her head, without another word, as two officers led her from the room. Within hours, the news spread throughout Chicago. The newspapers headlined, "Young socialite arrested for attempting to poison husband to inherit fortune." I read those words on my phone, feeling like I was living in a nightmare. The shares of the financial firm where Julian was a managing director plummeted. But fortunately, the board of directors acted quickly. They held a press conference. They were transparent with the information, and public opinion calmed down. Meanwhile, my perfume brand was praised by the press for an unexpected decision. I turned the fake foundation plan into a reality, creating a foundation to protect women who are victims of domestic violence. I wanted to transform this pain into something meaningful, so that no one would have to go through what Julian and I experienced. Julian, after several tests, gradually regained his health. The traces of arsenic in his body decreased, and the doctor said he would soon be back to normal. One afternoon, the two of us were sitting on the balcony of the house, watching the sunset paint the Chicago sky an intense red. Julian took my hand, his voice warm. "Mom, thanks to you, I'm still alive. From now on, we won't let anyone mess with our family." I looked at him. I smiled, but the tears started to flow again. "Son, I just want you to be safe. I couldn't lose you." He hugged me, and in that moment, I felt the strength of a mother's love, the one thing that can never be destroyed. Looking at the sunset, I thought silently. Natalie's greed had buried her, but my love for Julian, and his for me, had overcome it all. This house, the perfume brand, and all our dreams would continue to exist. Not for the money, but because we had each other. I squeezed Julian's hand, feeling a great relief in my heart, but also the scars that only time could heal. The story we've told is fictional, but it is based on some real events. The names and places have been changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to think. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I'm truly curious. If it were you, in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace, or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know what you think, because every story is a candle that can light someone else's path. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the end screen, I'm leaving you two of the channel's most beloved stories. I assure you, they will surprise you. Thank you for staying until the end.